Hi, my name is Ravi Krishnaswami. I'm the co-owner and creative director at COPILOT Music and Sound. We're a full-service audio agency based in New York City, and I'm here to talk a little bit about sonic branding. It's been sort of a buzzword in the last year or two, and I think it would benefit from a little bit of demystification. Have you ever heard of the other room test? It's this persistent cliche that goes like this: I want people to know it's our brand even when they hear it from the other room. So they're implying that the music is so amazing and memorable that it sticks to the brand and you can recognize it later on without any visual information. Great. It's usually assumed to be, a result of just the sheer brilliance of the composer, maybe the singers exclaiming the name of the brand or a tagline.
That's the way it is. With a bottle of Coke and the way it will stay. For the taste of your life, what the world wants today. Oh yeah, it's the real thing. Coca-Cola,
And sometimes that works, but that was a really popular thing to say during the golden age of TV advertising, when it was presumed that most people were living in a binary existence of either looking at or not looking at their living room television. The popularity of jingles during the early days of television can be attributed to the fact that television advertising grew organically out of radio advertising. Most of the creatives that pioneered television advertising began their career in a medium where you had no choice but to tell your brand's story with audio. Believe it or not, the NBC chimes, one of the most recognizable sonic logos, started out as a way to cover over the sound of NBC radio engineers switching cables between shows, not as a branding exercise. According to a study recently that I saw in Vox Media, smart speakers like the Alexa, the Google Home, Apple HomePod grew by 78% during the last holiday buying season, pushing that number up to 119 million of these in circulation. Santa brought one to nearly 1 in 10 people. In a recent survey I read, it was reported that audio content is by far the highest growing medium, with a whopping 146% rate of growth over the last 5 years. It's also likely that you or someone you know has maybe recorded a podcast in the last year. It seems like everybody has one now. Some people in this industry are predicting podcast advertising revenue is going to top $600 million, a number 10 times what was just spent 4 years earlier. And finally, returning to that binary existence of the early days of TV, Nielsen is reporting that almost half of the television viewers now admit to looking at a second screen, their smartphone, while watching their favorite shows. Forget the other room. Brands cannot rely upon eyeballs staying in place the way they used to, but ears listen in all directions. This data all points to the importance of thinking more about your brand's sound identity and to putting the work into building a language that can be applied to an ever-expanding world of interactions. So you've spent your 1,000 hours and untold dollars developing your visual logo, identity, style guide, but you haven't explored your sonic brand yet. Where do you start? It can feel a little intimidating for a few reasons. The first reason is most people in a position to spearhead this work may have a very sophisticated ear for sound and branding, but haven't studied music or sound design, meaning they have very little practical vocabulary to describe what they are imagining. The second reason is there hasn't been the kind of standardization of terms and processes that you might see in other areas of design. One company might call it sound mark, another company calls it an audio mnemonic, another a sonic logo. The lack of a clear name for what we do can make the whole process feel unapproachable. And because this work is so specialized, there are simply not enough people doing it to create a critical mass of conferences, pedagogy, and trade associations that would sort of encourage a standard process to develop. The third reason is sound, particularly when heard on its own in a very short format, can be infinitely more subjective than visuals. You and I may agree that the blue we are seeing is a little too purple, or that changing to a sans serif font might help modernize your typography. But a cello section might feel romantic to me and foreboding to you. Who's to say what it is? Even if you execute your instincts, will your audience feel the same way you do when they hear it? As a composer and sound designer, working with brands, media networks, ad agencies, game publishers, and others like that, I've created intentional, strategic music and sound for logo animations in a wide variety of contexts, working with my team at COPILOT. The first thing I'll say is, anyone who claims to have an ironclad process and scientifically proven methodology is great at one thing: sales. Sound and music are best developed in a space that includes the harder to quantify and replicate elements of emotion, improvisation, mistakes, obsessions, gut instincts. I've worked with many brilliant composer sound designers over the years, and each of them brings a unique and valuable voice to a brand if their ear is actually valued and trusted. In a medium where there is no right answer, the converse is also true. There's no wrong answer. The bottom line is that this work will make an impact, and it can always be improved upon, and it should already be in place. So the best advice on getting started is to get started. You're probably wondering, okay, I want to get started, but what are the pitfalls? Common mistake I see on the agency and brand side is that business-minded folks always spend way too much time trying to convince themselves that one right answer exists, and that the team's job is to methodically search it out. This is a creative medium, and in fact, as I've often seen, a whole number of different solutions might work equally well. The most important thing is that the brand and the composer go on a journey together, and that the result feels right for the brand. That they care about what they've created, and at the end of the journey, they'll fight for it. So, it's not uncommon for a brand to ask a composer for something as memorable as the Intel logo. Now, with all due respect to important research bringing neuroscience and musicology together, this is getting the cart way before the horse. It's like telling your spouse that you want to move to a city you can navigate without a GPS. Yeah, some cities like New York have grids, but others like Boston, I get pretty lost in Boston. Anybody can master a commute to work if you've done it for over a few years with repetition and consistency. Your muscle memory and your peripheral vision take over. That's what we're talking about here. The Intel logo, while it was absolutely intentionally designed to be engaging and easy to remember as a piece of music, is, I think, really iconic because of repetition and consistency. Creating the sound is only half the work. It barely has any value until it is faithfully applied across every possible audio touch point over several years, at least. That may, your hold music, your television, radio, in your stores if you have a retail location. You have to use it in order for people to recognize it. So one of my favorite branding exercises was launching AMC Networks' original series logo, which would precede their first few award-winning shows like Mad Men, Breaking Bad, and The Walking Dead. Kind of launching AMC into this golden age of television. So, with a rough motion graphic logo in place, we had a conversation that outlined the importance of this sound signaling the network's new programming. I sat in my studio with a blank session template in my digital audio workstation of choice, which is Digital Performer. And, the most important word echoing in my head was drama. My mind started to travel to some of the great dramatic plays I've seen off Broadway, and I kept returning to Doors. I don't know why Doors kind of popped into my head, but they have this magical quality in theater, because you can often see both sides of life at once on stage, and inside and outside, and they often punctuate scenes. A scene starts or ends with a door closing or opening. A relationship starts or ends that way. It's a dramatic sound, and somehow that just sort of ended up working my way into my hands as I started opening up folders of pre-recorded sounds that I had assembled in my sound design library, and I centered this piece around the sound of a door closing. The rest of the composition came down to one simple set of notes, an interval of a fifth, which can become major or minor depending on a third tone being added. And, after a long period of experimenting with the register and timbre of these notes, I kind of landed on the final thing. Drama can include a wide range of emotions, but the exact strategy of this sound was to transform the brand from a more nostalgic and trivial place to a more groundbreaking and award-winning tier. So I sort of decided that it needed to feel serious in terms of register and modern in terms of tone. I'll play it now. So I love how this piece turned out, and they successfully used it for years, and it set the tone of what they were going to do in the future. Its creation was a perfect balance of strategy, clear priorities, daydreaming, and a common sense blend of music and sound design. As of recording this, Siri, Alexa, Google Assistant, and others are mere toddler robots, tasked with only the most basic functions and integrated into only the largest apps out there. As they grow up, it's not hard to imagine every app functioning through voice commands and giving feedback through sound. Hypersonic speakers that can project sound onto a person in a specific location are just transitioning from prototypes to things you can easily buy and install. VR and AR are creating infinite possibilities when it comes to triggering sound in ways that transcend physics and real-world practicalities. Brands would be really well served by thinking early and strategically about what those sounds are going to be, what they'll mean, and how they'll stand out. It's an exciting time. I encourage you to experiment and trust your composer. See you later.